What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. The recent announcement for the expansion pass for Pokémon Sword and Shield is interesting, to say the least. The content that they've shown thus far looks pretty great, although I am slightly concerned about what this might mean from an ongoing business perspective. I realize that this is an accepted practice in the industry at this point, but it just sort of seems like a slippery slope. Before you know it, they'll start having season passes and payable skins and that sort of thing to try and wring out all the money from the wallets of Pokemon fans out there. Anyway, the second part of the DLC, the Crown Tundra, has me the most interested, because it's shown that a large chunk of past legendaries will be available to capture in this section of the Galar region. But even more than that, they've shown that there are new forms of the past legendary bird Pokemon, which seem to be psychic, ground, and dark, maybe, to me. But even more than that, they have new legendary Pokemon as well, and I'm not just talking about Urshifu and Calyrex. There are also two brand new Regi Pokémon in this section of the DLC. You can tell that they're new and not different forms because of the eye patterns being different from any of the ones that we've seen previously. Otherwise, we'd see repeating patterns, like with the Delta Regis in the Pokemon Insurgence fan game. It appears that these new Regis will be Electric and Dragon type respectively. However, it does beg the question, what will they be named? Since the previous Regi trio simply adopted the names of their type. However, Regi Electric and Regi Dragon don't exactly roll off the tongue. So for the purposes of this video, I'll be referring to them as Regivolt and Regidrake. Both of these present an interesting case, because the previous Regi trio were all made of elemental materials, but presumably could be sculpted or made by man. Whereas it's a little harder to mold lightning, and I'm not entirely sure that you could even classify dragon as an element that you could harness. But first of all, I'm having a hard time believing that there would only be two Regi Pokémon, since the Pokemon Company does love their trios, and the originals came as a trilogy as well. So I still think there will be a third one that they've not told us about yet. But if so, what type would it be? Well, it would have to match the other two and be something a little more ethereal, and not malleable by human hands. Like how you can't exactly build something out of dragon energy. My thinking is that it would have to be something else that man from long ago would look at in awe, and be unable to tap into its power, like lightning or dragons, and I'm leaning towards psychic. We could call it Regicide. Not Regicide, that's killing a monarch. I could see Regicide tearing through the minds of towns in the olden days, wreaking as much havoc as the other two. But I still don't think that's all. It seems appropriate to me that these three naturally occurring Regis would have their own master, much like the manufactured Regis do in Regigigas. Now, to fully explain the existence of the other Regis, we would have to dive into the relationship between the masters, and of course, it being antagonistic. Regigigas has long been against his foe, whether that be another form of Regigigas, like the Kanto birds have their new forms, or an entirely separate Pokemon. Either way, it makes sense to me that this rival form would be, in fact, a pure ghost type. So if it is another Pokemon, we could call it Regispector. But that way, Regigigas couldn't touch it. So Regigigas, being on the side of humanity and wanting to protect them from Regispector, saw its naturally occurring horde of servants and decided to create its own, making the Regis we know from Gen 3. There had to be a reason why Regigigas would create Regirock, Regis, and Registeel, and having a rival band of elemental creatures that threatened mankind would be a rather compelling reason to do so. It makes sense that it could have gotten the idea from an already existing group that functioned in the same way, and then constructed its allies out of building materials to fight the foe that it couldn't even touch. And if there is in fact a rival to Regigigas, whether in another form or a separate Pokemon altogether, then that would almost certainly lead into Sinnoh remakes coming to the Switch. Now, I'm not saying that it'll happen this year, or even this generation necessarily. I hope it's before Gen 9, but they will be coming at some point, so the best way to lead into that would be to elevate a mini story arc about a legendary Pokemon that was introduced in Gen 4. Why else would the people of Snowpoint City have built a temple to Regigigas? Although I guess there are temples for the new Regi Pokemon as well. Maybe that could have been to imprison them? Although I guess the same could be said about Regigigas itself. Well, then maybe the whole story is backwards, and these new Regis were created to defend humanity by Regigigas' rival. That could be why they made it so hard to find the Regis in the first place, and hid them in an entirely separate region, so that they could ensure that no one would awaken their master again. I suppose that version could be true, but I'm inclined to believe the former, where the Regis we know were created for our benefit to defend us from the so-called new Regi Pokemon and the relationships between their masters. Bear in mind, if you're wondering what my evidence is for this, there isn't any. This is all purely my speculation. But I suppose all we can do now is wait to find out. I'll also be interested to see how many people look at this video and say face reveal or something to that effect, because inevitably it happens every time. Although there have been numerous opportunities at this point, so if you haven't checked out any of those videos, why not go ahead and do so? What do you think about these new legendary Regi Pokemon? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!